In the short term, what position will the Young Liberals take in regards to Peter Dutton's ill-informed opposition to the Indigenous Voice to Parliament vote? And in the long term, what do you see as the Young Liberals' role, if any, in dragging the Liberal Party into the 21st century on a range of issues, such as female representation in the party, climate change, and minority representation, to name it?
Thanks for your question, Sophie. And obviously, the topic of the Liberal Party's position on the Voice has been one that's attracted a lot of interest over the last week or so since the party came out and made its position clear. As the Young Liberals, we don't have a formal position on the Voice. It's not something that we've sat down and voted upon. But what I can say is that there is a range of views that's reflective of the broad spectrum of Australia, from people that are really enthusiastic and supportive to people who just aren't sure to people who don't support it. So there is that genuine broad range of views. I can say that my view is that I'm open to voting yes, but I think I, along with many other Australians, just want to get a few more answers and a bit more clarity on what exactly it is that we're voting on, so that when we go to the ballot box, we know exactly what it is we're voting for. I think that there's still a long journey that we have to go on over the coming months before we get to the ballot box, and the government needs to engage in that process with sincerity. We've seen polls...
But haven't we seen, but haven't we already seen that Peter Dutton and the leadership of the Liberal Party have landed? They've had the questions they've wanted and they've said we're not supporting it.
Not supporting
so that decision's already been made.
Yeah.
Where does that leave you as a Young Liberal?
Well, as a Young Liberal, I mean, I get to make up my own mind, and that's the great thing about the Liberal Party, is that we have freedom of individual conscience and we're not bound to a position that our parliamentary party takes. The Young Liberals have an incredibly proud history of being the conscience of the Liberal Party. We're the ones that stand there and do the work on the ground and also speak up for what we think that young Australians think and believe, and be a representative for that voice. The Young Liberals play a really important role in the Liberal Party. I sit on our state and federal executives in my capacity as the Young Liberal president, and that means that young people have a voice at the table. So we're not bound to that position. But again, I would reiterate...
Do you disagree with that position, taking it at the national level?
Look, I think that the Liberal Party has an opportunity now to engage with the ongoing committee process that we've got into the Voice legislation. And I would really like to see them engage with that process constructively, because at the end of the day, we're only going to get one question at the referendum. There's only going to be one question at the ballot box.
Well, the Prime Minister gave, the opposition leader almost 8 chances and 8 opportunities to engage in that consultation process. The question came out very clear, and it just seemed like Mr Dutton just used excuse after excuse to just keep campaigning for that no vote. And it's almost very confusing. It's like, what clarification do you want?
Fatima, wasn't it incumbent on your side of politics to convince them? And you failed to do that. Does that now make it more difficult to get a successful yes vote without bipartisanship?
No, I don't think it will. I have faith in the Australian people. I have faith in grassroots level organisations. I have faith in our community groups, our faith groups, that we can do this without the coalition support. Like, we have given you guys and your coalition party multiple opportunities to come to the table to discuss the question posed to the Australian people, and we're not afraid to continue campaigning for the yes vote, and we have complete faith in the Australian population.
Andrew Neil, you're watching this from the outside, but you've had your own experience of the Brexit referendum. What do you draw on from that in your observations of what we're seeing here?
Well, the first thing that struck me is that young politicians and old politicians have one thing in common: they don't answer the question.
Yeah. I think I've answered the question.
No, I think you're referring to Dimitry.
I didn't point to you. Yeah. And it probably is something in the DNA on that. Look, I'm a visitor to this country. When I got on the plane from London a few days ago, The Voice was a television show. But when I arrived in Sydney, it was a...
It's still a television show.
It was a constitutional amendment. And it seems to me, just trying to catch up on this, that you are now going to have a really good debate. Yeah. And if you're going to change the Constitution on something so fundamental. As I understand it, there is widespread support for reconciliation. There's widespread support for making up the wrongs of the past as well, and widespread support that something should be done. How it should be done, you're now going to debate if this is the right way forward. And I think if you're going to change the constitution, that's a good thing. You should have a debate.
What do referendums reveal about a country? If you draw on the Brexit experience, it did reveal something fundamentally about Britain that many in the media or in inverted commas elite circles may have overlooked.
Politicians really hate referenda.
Yeah.
Because they lose control over them.
Yeah.
And they don't know what the outcome will be. And the outcome can sometimes be disastrous for them. David Cameron was the British Prime Minister. He lost the Brexit referendum. He's gone. Who's ever heard of David Cameron now? Yet he'd just been elected for 5 years. They're unpredictable. Who's leading each side can often have a big impact on the result. And it may have nothing to do with what you're talking about. So, just for example, if Mr. Albanese, for other reasons, say the economy or defence policy or foreign policy, isn't that popular by, I think, October is when you're going to have the vote?
Yeah.
Isn't that popular by October? That will hit his side of the referendum, even though it's got nothing to do with the argument on the referendum itself. And then people often vote for reasons that have got nothing to do with the question being asked. A lot of people voted for Brexit in Britain, not because they were particularly interested in Britain leaving the European Union, but they wanted basically to thump the establishment. And this was the best way of doing it because the whole of the British establishment was in favour of staying within the European Union. So people who felt marginalised, who felt left out, poorer cities in the north of England and so on, they felt, hey, this is the way we'll get them to take notice of us. And I understand why you want as many people as possible to be on your side of the debate, but actually you can have too many. If it seems like a carve-up, among the political elite on the left and the right, there will be a populist reaction to that. And it could actually be your downfall rather than your victory. I mean, I covered years ago, not long after dinosaurs ruled the earth, a referendum as to whether Norway should join the European Union or not, way back in the early 70s. In that referendum, all the trade unions were in favour of joining. All of big business was in favour of joining. All the mainstream political parties were in favour of joining. Nearly all the media, pretty much all the media were in favour of joining. The Norwegian people said we're not going to join. And I think it was just them saying, we're not going to be told what to do. This is our one shot for us to make up our own minds.
What do you, listening to that, Anne, and the voice of experience having lived through the bruising Brexit campaign and the others as well, what do you draw from that when you look ahead to what October may bring?
Look, you know, what Australia needs to be conscious of, that this is not a political agenda. This is a moral and ethical agenda. And this will determine the integrity of Australia, because individually, every person has a role to play. Whether they vote yes or whether they vote no is going to be to that individual's question of integrity. Now, the one thing that I'll bring to your attention is that the statement of the heart is a statement from the heart. Our people laid their soul bare to you and made themselves vulnerable in extending the hand to this nation and asking you to recognise us and to give us a voice. This country has criminalised our children. They are highly incarcerated. We're even locking up 10-year-olds. What a shame to this country. And yet, what you decide is going to determine our future. We shared with you our pain, but we also shared our hope. And if we don't have that hope recognised, you are then damning us to hell, and you are going to kill a nation of people.
Dimitry?
Look, as Kanishka said in the previous segment, our first Australians have given us an enormous invitation, and I really want everybody to be able to support this voice. That's something that I sincerely believe, and I think lots of people are approaching this with a good nature. I think it's so important that we do have a respectful debate on this topic and that we do work through the very important details that we need to see. We still haven't seen legislation for what exactly the voice is going to be. Now, raising those questions and raising those doubts is not about trying to find a way to frustrate or stop it. It's about being honest and so that we know what it is that we're voting for when we walk into the ballot box. I think that it's incumbent upon the government to be honest and upfront with the Australian people on that topic. That's not trying to frustrate the process. That's about trying to ensure its success. Andrew makes a very good point. If it starts to look tricky, then people will start to be sceptical, and that's not a conducive way for us to actually move forward and reconcile with First Australians. I want to see us reconcile with First Australians. I think that it's the right thing to give them a say on decisions that affect them. That's a fundamentally liberal principle. That's why I think there are plenty of Liberals out there that will be supporting the referendum. But let's not characterise the debate by saying people who have questions, people who have doubts, they're just there to try and stop the process. That's not what's going on. I think everybody just wants to understand what it is that we're going to get after we vote in this referendum.